Right, hello everybody, and welcome to another Harbor meetup. This is the United States version that's friendly to the US time zones. It's the 18th of December, and that's our last meeting for the month, year, decade, put it however you want to say it. This is a recorded conversation, so make sure you adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. So, well, hello everybody again. Thank you all for attending. So a couple of big news from since the last time we talked. Harbor 1.10 is out, so it's like a major milestone release. Thank you to all that worked on that, especially you, Zach. You played the integral role at one of the biggest capabilities of the release, which is the pluggable scanning components. And again, like I mentioned earlier, congratulations on some of the blog posts and the marketing collateral that came from Anchor on the release. So we will continue promoting that and get some more eyeballs on that throughout their journey. I also saw the webinar that we did last week. So hopefully a lot of folks are viewing that and they're seeing the better together story between Anchor and Harbor and getting to light that up. So thank you again for all your work. I only have a few updates here. I want to talk a little bit about the next release of Harbor. And I have a slide here that that Alex prepared, and he also presented at the previous community meeting for Harbor that happened at an Asian time zone earlier today. So you guys probably can see my screen, but you're not seeing the presentation screen. You're seeing the actual PowerPoint. I'll leave it at that. So the 2.0 release of Harbor, this is initially we started calling it 1.11, but since it's a major release of Harbor, we're calling it 2.0. It will ship at or near KubeCon Europe, which is end of March, beginning of April of 2020. So that gives us a run rate of about 3.5 months. And it will be anchored by one of the biggest changes that's happening in Harbor, which is the OCI support. It's going to enable Harbor to not only host container images and home charts, but other artifacts, operators, synapse bundles, scripts, anything that organizations need. This is going to be a foundational component of Harbor now, and it's going to enable us to attract even more users on Harbor that want to use Harbor both as a repository, but as well as a policy engine that does the pluggable scanning that we talked about earlier that uses Anchor and Agua. You'll be able to do quotas. You'll be able to enforce role-based access control. You're going to be able to enforce authentication authorization. So all of the cool capabilities of Harbor now will be applicable to a wide range of artifacts. Huge release. Tag deletion. We're basically fixing a situation that's happening in Harbor today. So if you have a single tag that's basically referenced in multiple ways and you delete one of them, they all get deleted today, which is just how the Docker distribution and Harbor have implemented that work. So now we'll actually be able to properly count references so that if you delete a single tag, we won't delete other tags that are pointing to the same layer in Docker. This is also going to be enabled by some of the changes that are happening in the OCI support. The next feature is something that has been asked by a lot of customers, especially the team at GitLab, and that's don't block every time garbage collection happens. As the more and more folks are using Harbor at large scale, you're seeing a huge number of images hosted in Harbor. So when garbage collection is happening, either weekly, nightly, whatever ends up being configured, your users cannot push or pull images from Harbor. And this is becoming a problem with quality of service. It's becoming a problem with the uptime of Harbor. So now we're going to actually enable non-blocking garbage collection. So you'll be able to push and pull images while GC is ongoing. This is huge. The GitLab folks are going to help us on the stress and scale testing of this capability. But I encourage anybody else that's interested to come in and help us here. The next of the features are not necessarily required for the 2.0 release, but if they finish in time, we'll include them for sure. And that's advancing the peer-to-peer capabilities with Dragonfly and Kraken to enable better distribution of images to other hosts. There's a lot of good things that can happen by being able to distribute your images across the board, but there's also problems as well. Me and Alex and a couple of others were talking about that. I believe it was 2 weeks ago, and I called out two of those issues. I'll call them out here in the public so you guys can hear them as well. So one way that we can enable the P2P distribution is we can actually add one more replication target to Harbor. That could be Dragonfly or Kraken. So essentially today you can say, hey, I want to replicate this repository, or sorry, this project into Docker Hub, or I'm going to replicate that to Azure Registry. Now you can say, I want to replicate it to Dragonfly. And then you can use Dragonfly's peer-to-peer distribution mechanism to properly land that image everywhere that you want to put it, whether that's on the edge or geo-distributed, and that's great. However, if your end users are pulling the image from Dragonfly, essentially that becomes a problem for Harbor because the Harbor policy is no longer applied. So it can't just only distribute the images because you lose out on the policy. So that's my biggest concern with this capability. I want to make sure that when we design it right. The Dragonfly and Kraken community are going to help us implement the distribution. But if we don't get the policy right, then essentially, I don't think it's going to be widely used. If any of you guys has any comments on that or thoughts, please let me know. But that's my personal opinion in terms of the risks of this work here.
So would it be possible to implement some sort of webhook when we mark an image within Harbor as blocked, essentially send that over to Dragonfly or Kraken and say, hey, this object is no longer allowed to be downloaded, restricted essentially?
Yeah, that's something similar to what I was basically asking them to also distribute a kind of a Harbor manifest that includes a policy, and then the P2P tools need to understand that policy so they can implement it. And it's a simple policy. It could include auth, and it could include can you be pulled or not, whether that's for signing reasons or scanning reasons, and the auth part. The auth part might be the hardest thing for them to implement. Like if, for example, Zach Hill has no permissions to pull my image from Harbor and we block him, I don't want Zach Hill to go to Dragonfly to one of the geo-distributed images that was pushed down by Dragonfly and pull the same image. So we need to protect against both. I don't know what's that gonna look like. It seems that we have some work to do before we can actually light this up. It wasn't as simple as we thought initially.
How does it work with the current replication? And pardon my ignorance on that feature. When you replicate to Docker Hub or ECR and the other registries, are you expected then to also be running Harbor somewhere else and it will pull it down into another Harbor installation and users interact there? Or you have the same problem?
We have the same problem.
You don't have unified policy across all the endpoints that you can pull from. It seems like at some point you just have to have a Harbor proxy or the Harbor API with its metadata being replicated.
Yeah,
across
absolutely.
The entire system.
That's correct. We depend, like, for example, if we just distribute to Docker Hub, for example, we depend on Docker Hub's ability to enforce some form of policy like authentication authorization, but there's definitely no scanning. And here's actually the kicker. Let's say you're version 1 of your Docker image and you replicate that because it was clean, there's no CVEs, right? Then the image CV is found, then Harbor itself will not allow you to ever download that because you're still on V1 and it has a problem, and it will also not distribute it again to any of the replication targets. But if it has already been distributed, there's nothing we can do. Like we won't allow you to push it out to another replication because we already blocked it. But the guys that have already gotten it because it was distributed yesterday or the day before the CVE was happened, those guys are going to ship it out. So the important thing here is that Harbor itself, when you use Harbor across the board in your organization, in all your locations, then everything's great. As soon as you stop using Harbor, that policy can no longer be enforced.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, fundamentally, you can use other systems as data transport and replication systems, but the access control has to go through the Harbor API system, however that works, or you give up that capability.
Many months ago we talked about being able to proxy proxy connections. That might be what we might have to go through. So basically, the Docker client still interacts with Harbor to do the authentication authorization and determine if the image can be pulled, but the actual image pull happens from somewhere else. We can proxy that. We talked about that in the past. Maybe that's something that will do. I don't know. I just wanted to throw it out there so you guys are engaged on that. Um, the next one is Webhooks 2.0. So we're adding new webhooks for application tag deletion and tag retention. And as new capabilities are coming into Harbor, we're continuously adding more webhooks as well. Some of them come along the same time as the release of the new features. Some of them come later on. And the last feature is something that's been asked by quite a few customers. Today, if you sign an image and that image is replicated to another location, the signing is lost because the signature on image using Notary depends on both the URI of the image as well as the image itself. So we're trying to hop or push the Notary community on their version 2, which will enable you to do signing of an image that can persist across replication of the image where it changes the download location and you don't lose the signature. We're not doing the work, we're merely observers here, but we're trying to track that closely so we can actually enable that in Harbor as well. The last thing that we have, and that's not on this list, we've been having some trouble getting a lot of support from the Docker distribution in Docker itself, given the recent reorganization changes between Mirantis and Docker that even significantly deflate some of the resources that Docker has. We've been in some discussions with another big Harbor customer that's using their own forked Docker distribution to maintaining a combined Docker distribution between the two of us that will have updates, we'll maintain it, and we'll push it upstream as well as needed, but we won't depend only on Docker for fixing things. That's ongoing, and I believe that's going to be a big thing for us as well. That's it. I'm gonna leave it out open for questions, concerns, and I also wanna give some time to Zach from the federal government in case you had any specific agenda items that you brought today.
I just wanted to say good job on the 10 release. I just upgraded, working pretty good. I haven't played with all the advanced features, especially the scanning yet, but we hope to integrate it with, I'm not sure if Twistlock is on the list, but or whatever Twistlock is going to get renamed to, not Alta bought them. But I hope to eventually get that integrated into Harbor. One comment is, as we're trying to set up our clusters for users, is enabling LDAP authentication. It seems that you have to delete all your existing users before you can enable LDAP. I could be wrong about that, but that seems like sort of a like user management, being able to get that going, because that may not be a day one operation, but you might already have things in there that you don't want to delete that people are using. That would be maybe an area that could be improved upon for being able to have both local users and LDAP at the same time.
Unfortunately, that was a principle that Harbor made at the beginning, where you could either do LDAP or basically use Harbor as your user store in a database. So once you actually make one of the choices, you cannot go back. That's basically what you guys were encountering. So you can either choose LDAP or the other, but not both. If there's a key user scenario that you guys are looking at where you want both, I encourage you to file an issue on GitHub and put some of the business rationale behind it. As other customers or users of Harbor see that, they'll comment on that. If we get enough traction, we'll definitely work on it.
Okay, thanks.
And that's usually how we work. We ask people that they have cool scenarios to publish them out there. More people piggyback on that. Maybe some customer put some resources on it as well and helps us make it the reality.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for using Harbor. We love to hear more and more users of Harbor, especially if it's a success story. That's awesome. All right. Zach, anything on your mind? And the other Zach Hill now. Anything on your mind? Anything we can?
Nothing major. I mean, we have some new features we'll be adding into the Anchor adapter stuff for Harbor. A little better like granularity support for the vulnerabilities, kind of leveraging some of Anchor's whitelist and policy capabilities, so that you can kind of filter what gets shown in Harbor. So it would more match what your policy enforcement is getting done on the other side of Anchor with like the Kubernetes controllers and such. And we're working with some mutual customers on that stuff. So there will be updates coming on that adapter container, the actual adapter service itself. So if anybody's watching that, let me know if there's any additional issues on that specific adapter implementation or feature set. I'm happy to have those discussions, and GitHub is the best spot to have those conversations.
Okay, cool. By the way, I know you were looking into Windows containers. Has that progressed? Because I think as Windows containers have become more and more prevalent in this ecosystem, Harbor is probably one of the few registries that can host them and apply all this different fanfare that Harbor does. Being able to scan those Windows containers is going to be big. And since Anchor Enterprise is the only paid solution that works with Harbor today, that might be a good scenario for you guys to light up.
Yeah, we're active. That's actively in development right now, and it's planned for our next enterprise release sometime in late Q1, early Q2, expected. Again, no guarantees there.
Yep, absolutely.
And so, yeah, we're working with some folks from Microsoft on making sure that's kind of shored up and the best that it can be. And then the adapter will just kind of seamlessly support that. So there shouldn't be major changes necessary for Harbor users. It will just start being able to scan them.
Absolutely. And if you guys need any help on the Microsoft front, just let me know.
Will do.
And then once you guys do it, Seek Windows from Kubernetes community will definitely amplify that as well, because that's important to us. Like all our Kubernetes customers using Windows, we want that, plus all our Harbor customers. So you guys will get multiple FaceTime and promotions from 2 different areas.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Well, I don't have anything else unless someone else has something else. I'll like to wish everybody a great holiday season, and we'll see you guys. The next meeting is canceled, but the one after that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Michael.
Cool. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.